Okay, I want you to try a thought experiment with me. It's a pretty terrifying one, so just bear with me for a second.
Uh-oh, I'm intrigued.
Imagine we take a vacuum, not, a Hoover, but a philosophical void, and we suck out everything that makes up your daily life.
Everything.
Everything. We strip away the police, the laws, the judges, the schools, your parents. We take away the fear of punishment and the hope of reward. We take a group of human beings, strip them completely of civilization, and we drop them into a petri dish.
And in this case, the petri dish is a deserted tropical island.
Exactly. The question is, what grows in that dish?
It's the ultimate litmus test for the human soul, isn't it?
It is. When the software of society is uninstalled, what is the hardware that's left underneath? Are we, at our core, cooperative, kind, and inherently good? Do we naturally build a utopia? Or, underneath all the polite smiles and the table manners, are we actually savage? If you take away the consequences, do we just descend into absolute total chaos?
I mean, you're touching on the oldest debate in political philosophy there. It's the cage match between Jean-Jacques Rousseau and Thomas Hobbes.
Right. The noble savage versus
Life in a state of nature being, as Hobbes famously put it, nasty, brutish, and short. Is man corrupted by society? Or is society the only thing holding our brutish nature in check?
And for the last, 70 years, for most of the English-speaking world, the answer to that question has been dictated by one very specific, very bleak book.
A book most of us were probably forced to read in ninth grade English class.
Yes, probably while wearing an ill-fitting school uniform. We are talking, of course, about William Golding's 1954 masterpiece, Lord of the Flies.
A book that has, I think it's fair to say, haunted the popular imagination for decades. It is the standard bearer for the cynical view of humanity.
It really is. It basically argues that we are all monsters who are just barely held in check by the police.
Yeah, that civilization is this very, very thin veneer.
But today, we're not just going to do a book report. We aren't just going to recap the plot of a book you probably read 20 years ago. We're going on a proper deep dive.
Okay.
We're going to explore the terrified world that actually created this story, the shadow of the atomic bomb, the psychological scars of World War II. We're going to look at all the hidden layers inside it, the political allegories, the Freudian experiments on paper.
And, maybe most importantly, we are going to put William Golding on trial.
That's the part I'm most excited about. We're going to pit Golding's very pessimistic fiction against reality because, and a lot of people don't know this scenario actually happened.
It did.
A group of schoolboys was shipwrecked on a deserted island, not for a few weeks, but for over a year. And what happened to them is the complete polar opposite of what Golding predicted.
It's a fascinating and, I think, vital counter-narrative.
Yeah.
You have the darkness of man's heart on one side.
And the reality of human resilience on the other. So let's get into it. Let's start with the book itself. I think most people remember the basics, right? Plane crash, British schoolboys, conch shell, piggy's glasses, and then it all goes horribly wrong.
Murders.
But I think we often forget the setting. This wasn't just a random vacation gone wrong, was it? That's a key detail.
No, absolutely not. And that context is so vital to understanding the book. If you look closely at the text, the boys are being evacuated.
Evacuated from what?
From a war, a nuclear war. The book opens in the shadow of the atomic bomb. You have to remember this was published in 1954.
The height of the Red Scare, duck and cover drills.
Exactly. The poet W.H. Auden called this the age of anxiety. The Cold War is freezing over. The memory of the mushroom clouds over Hiroshima and Nagasaki is still burned into everyone's retinas. The reason these boys are on the island in the first place is that the adult world has already failed. Utterly.
So the adults are off destroying each other with nuclear weapons, and the boys are just the fallout from that.
They are literally the fallout. That puts such a different spin on it, doesn't it? It frames the whole thing not just as some adventure story, but as a microcosm. Golding is setting up a control group.
He's basically saying, okay, the adults are proving that civilization is a sham by blowing each other up. Let's see if the next generation, the children, are any better.
Precisely. Golding is constructing a social experiment on paper. He's asking, if we strip away the structures of civilization, which, let's be honest, clearly aren't working that well anyway since the world is at war, what is left? What is the raw material of human nature?
And to understand why he was so incredibly pessimistic about that raw material, we have to look at where the idea even came from. Because he didn't just pull this out of thin air. He was reacting against something, wasn't he?
He was. He was very deliberately punching up against a very popular, very optimistic genre of Victorian literature. There was this book published way back in 1858 by a guy named R.M. Ballantyne called The Coral Island.
Ah, yes, I've heard of this. It's basically the anti-Lord of the Flies.
Or rather, Lord of the Flies is a direct, vicious parody of it.
Yeah.
In the Coral Island, you have a group of British boys shipwrecked on an island. But because this is 1858 and the absolute height of the British Empire...
Boys are perfect little gentlemen. Of course they are.
Of course. They don't go savage. They maintain their impeccable manners. They organize a proper hierarchy. They hunt. They fish.
Yeah.
And get this, they even convert the savage natives to Christianity.
Oh, wow.
It's this very optimistic, very colonial view that British culture is so inherently superior that even children carry it in their blood. They basically turn the island into a functional miniature England.
So Golding reads this book in the 1950s and thinks, what? This is absolute garbage.
He thought it was total and complete nonsense. He thought it was a dangerous fantasy. There's a very famous story where Golding turned to his wife after reading it to his own kids and said, "Wouldn't it be a good idea if I wrote a book about children on an island, children who behave in the way children really would behave?"
Which is funny, but also deeply chilling, because he implies that how children really behave is pretty monstrous.
Yes, and to make the point absolutely clear, he even used the same names, right?
He did, didn't he? Ralph and Jack.
Yep. In the Coral Island, the main characters are Ralph and Jack. Golding lifts those names directly to create these twisted caricatures of Ballantyne's heroes. He's taking the Victorian ideal of the plucky British lad and showing what he believed was the ugly reality underneath.
That without the threat of punishment, without the rigid structure of society, those same British lads would tear each other limb from limb.
Exactly.
But why was he so convinced of that? I mean, Golding was a school teacher, right? I know kids can be unruly, but tear each other apart is a pretty strong prediction to make. Was he just cynical because he spent all day dealing with teenagers?
He was a teacher, yes, and that experience was definitely part of it. He understood the cruelty of schoolboys. He knew about bullying, about social hierarchies. But the real darkness in Golding's worldview, the thing that forged it, came from his experience in World War II.
Right. This is the context we just cannot ignore.
We can't. Golding wasn't just an observer. He was a participant. He was a lieutenant in the Royal Navy.
So he saw actual combat.
Oh, significant combat. He wasn't peeling potatoes on a supply ship. He was there for the sinking of the Bismarck, which was one of the most famous and brutal naval engagements of the war.
Wow.
He commanded a rocket-launching landing craft during the D-Day invasion of Normandy. He was at the front. He participated in the assault on Walcheren in the Netherlands. He spent years at sea, facing the constant threat of U-boats and mines and watching people die.
So he saw the absolute worst of what humanity can do to itself.
He saw it up close. Before the war, there was this sense, especially in Britain, that evil was something other. Evil was what the Nazis did. Evil was a foreign concept. But Golding watched ordinary men, men with degrees, doctors, lawyers, people from so-called civilized society, commit horrific acts of violence when the situation demanded it.
He realized the capacity for evil wasn't a Nazi trait.
It was a human trait. It was inside all of them, inside him.
There's that famous quote of his, something about bees.
Yes. Man produces evil as a bee produces honey.
It's such a chilling line.
It is. He came to believe that just as it is in a bee's biological nature to make honey, it is in our biological nature to create suffering and chaos. He saw the Holocaust, the Blitz, the firebombing of Dresden, the Bataan Death March. He called it a war without mercy. And he realized that if you push people hard enough, that veneer of civilization cracks instantly.
So Lord of the Flies is basically him processing that trauma. He takes that horrifying realization that evil is innate, and he applies it to the most innocent group he can think of, children.
Precisely. If you wrote a book about soldiers killing each other on an island, we'd just say, well, of course, war is hell. We would excuse it. But by making them children, and specifically wealthy, well-educated British choir boys, the supposed cream of the crop, he removes the excuse of war made them do it.
He's saying, no, this is who we are, even the best of us, even the children, especially the children.
It's a bleak, bleak message. And it's interesting that despite becoming this literary classic, it wasn't exactly welcomed with open arms by the publishing world at first.
Oh, not at all. It was rejected by almost everyone.
By so many publishers. The manuscript was originally titled Strangers from Within, which is actually a very telling title, the idea that the enemy, the stranger, is inside us. But publishers hated it.
I read one of the rejection notes. It's famous now.
Which one? The rubbish and dull one.
That's the one. Absurd and uninteresting fantasy. Rubbish and dull. Imagine being the editor who wrote that about a future Nobel Prize winner's masterpiece.
You'd never live it down.
Yeah.
It eventually found a home at Faber and Faber, but even then, they made him change the title. They were the ones who came up with Lord of the Flies.
Which is such a heavy title. It sounds cool and menacing, but what does it actually mean? Where does it come from?
It's a literal translation of the Hebrew name Beelzebub.
The demon.
Yes. In various biblical and occult texts, Beelzebub is a powerful demon, often considered a prince of devils, or even Satan himself. So the title literally means the devil.
It signals immediately that this isn't an adventure story.
Not at all. It's a religious and moral allegory about the presence of the devil or evil within humanity.
Okay, let's unpack that allegory, because one of the reasons this book is taught in every school is that you can read it through so many different lenses. You've got the political lens, the psychological lens, the religious lens. Let's start with the political. You have these boys trying to set up a government from scratch.
Right. And Golding gives us these incredibly clear archetypes. First, you have Ralph.
Ralph, the hero, sorta.
He's the protagonist, at least. He represents democracy, order, civilization, and collective responsibility. He's the one who finds the conch shell. He uses it to call the first assembly.
And he's elected. That's crucial, isn't it? He doesn't seize power.
It's absolutely crucial. He isn't a tyrant. He's chosen by the group. And his main concern is the signal fire. He's always looking at the long game, rescue. He represents the instinct to build, to plan, to forego immediate pleasure for long-term survival.
And then in the other corner, you have Jack.
Jack is the embodiment of autocracy, totalitarianism, and the raw lust for power. He doesn't want to be elected. He believes he deserves to rule because he's the head choir boy. He was a leader back in the old world.
He rules by fear and charisma, while Ralph is offering work-building huts, keeping the fire going.
All the boring, necessary stuff.
Exactly. Jack offers fun, he offers hunting, he offers meat, and crucially, he offers protection from the beast.
It really is a perfect mirror for the rise of fascism in the 20th century, isn't it?
It's textbook. You have the ineffective democracy, Ralph struggling to keep people focused on the boring stuff like rules and sanitation, while the fascist leader, Jack, whips everyone up into a frenzy with pageantry, tribalism, and violence.
And he creates a terrifying enemy, the beast, and then promises that only he has the strength to destroy it. It's the classic dictator's playbook.
I alone can fix it.
Exactly that.
Yeah.
And then you have the other key players. Trapped in the middle of this political struggle, you have Piggy.
Poor Piggy.
Pure Piggy. He represents the intellectual, scientific, the rational. He's the one with the glasses, the technology to make fire. He's the one who knows how to properly use the conch. He has all the ideas.
But he has zero charisma, and he's physically weak.
Right. He has asthma. His asthma, as they call it. He's overweight. He's socially awkward. Golding is showing us, pretty brutally, that in a state of nature, intellect without physical power is incredibly vulnerable. Science is useless if the mob refuses to listen to it.
Piggy has all the right answers, but nobody cares because Jack is more exciting and offers immediate gratification.
It's a terrifying thought. And then you have the fourth major political figure, who I always found to be the scariest character in the whole book.
It has to be Roger.
It's Roger. Jack wants power, but Roger just wants to hurt people.
He's pure sadism.
Pure and simple. Jack uses violence as a tool for political control. Roger uses violence because he enjoys it. At the beginning of the book, there's that incredible scene where Roger is throwing stones at a younger boy, Henry.
But he throws to miss.
He throws to miss. And Golding writes that around the boy was the protection of parents and school and policemen and the law. Roger is still held back by the conditioning of civilization. He still feels the taboo.
But as that conditioning wears off,
Roger becomes the executioner. He's the one who sharpens the stick at both ends. He's the one who drops the boulder on Piggy. He's the Himmler to Jack's Hitler, the quiet, efficient, gleeful torturer.
So that's the political layer, a crash course in government. But you can also look at this whole thing psychologically, right? Like a Freudian nightmare playing out.
Absolutely. It maps almost perfectly onto Freud's structure of the psyche. Ralph is the ego.
The rational self.
The rational self that has to mediate between our desires and our morals. He's constantly trying to balance things and keep the group together. Jack is the eyed.
Pure instinct.
All of it. The primal instinctual drive for aggression, dominance, and immediate gratification. I want meat, I want to hunt, I want to kill. It's the pleasure principle in its most raw form.
And Piggy, then, is the superego.
Exactly. He's the voice of conscience, the internalized rules of parents and society, constantly saying, you shouldn't do that. What would the grown-ups think? Act like adults.
So the island is the mind. And as the story goes on, the ego, Ralph, loses control. The superego, Piggy, is systematically silenced and destroyed, and the eyed, Jack, takes over completely.
It's a complete breakdown of the human psyche. It's a story about a descent into madness.
But there's one character we haven't mentioned who doesn't sit into the political or Freudian boxes quite as neatly, and that's Simon.
Simon. The mystic. The strange one.
He's the religious allegory, isn't he?
He is. Simon is the Christ figure of the novel. He's different from the others from the very beginning. He's compassionate. He helps the younger kids, the little ones, get fruit they can't reach. He wanders off into nature by himself to meditate in his little clearing in the jungle.
And most importantly, he's the one who has the revelation.
He's the prophet. He has the revelation about what the beast really is.
Because the other boys think the beast is a snake thing or a ghost or some monster from the sea, they are looking outward for the source of their fear.
They are externalizing it. But Simon is the only one who understands instinctively that the problem is internal. There's that incredible hallucinatory scene where he confronts the Lord of the Flies, the severed pig's head on a stick buzzing with flies.
But the devil.
And the head talks to him. It says, fancy thinking the beast was something you could hunt and kill. I'm part of you. Close, close, close. I'm the reason why it's no-go.
That is the core message of the entire book right there.
It is. The beast isn't something you can kill with a spear. The beast is us. It's the evil in the human heart.
And like a Christ figure, Simon then tries to bring this good news, this truth to the people to save them from their own fear. He climbs the mountain, finds out the so-called beast is just the corpse of a dead parachutist, and he runs down the mountain to tell the boys.
And what happens when the prophet brings the truth?
They kill him.
They kill him. In their frenzied tribal dance, they mistake him for the beast and they beat him to death on the beach. It's the martyrdom of the prophet. The group, in their ignorance and fear, destroys the only person who could have saved them from their delusion.
It's so heavy. And Golding reinforces all of this with these powerful symbols that just get systematically destroyed as the book goes on. We mentioned the conch.
The conch is civilization in a nutshell. Whoever holds the conch gets to speak. It's the right to free speech, it's democratic process, it's law and order.
And at the beginning, they all respect it. It has an almost magical authority.
But as Jack's power grows, he starts to undermine it. He says, bollocks to the rules. We're strong, we hunt.
And then the final moment, when Roger rolls that boulder from the cliff.
He doesn't just kill Piggy. The text is so specific. It says the conch, which Piggy was holding, exploded into 1,000 white fragments and ceased to exist.
It's not just broken, it ceases to exist.
That is the moment democracy dies on the island. It's not just ignored, it's obliterated with extreme prejudice.
And what about Piggy's glasses?
The glasses are another perfect symbol. They represent science, intellectual clarity, and technology. They are the means of creating fire.
Which is life, the hope of rescue.
At first, yes, they're used for the common good, the signal fire to get rescued. But then Jack and his hunters raid Ralph's camp, and they don't steal the conch, they steal the glasses.
The theft of technology by a totalitarian regime.
To use for its own destructive ends.
Yeah.
Without the glasses, Piggy is literally, blind to reason, is helpless. And Jack uses the power of the fire not to signal for help, but to cook his pigs, and eventually to smoke out Ralph from his hiding place so he can kill him.
It's the ultimate perversion of power. The tool that was meant to save them is weaponized to destroy their own island.
Which brings us to the fire itself. It has that duality, doesn't it?
It does. It represents the hope of rescue, that connection to the civilized world. But it also represents destruction. The first fire they make gets out of control and kills one of the little ones.
And the ultimate irony, of course, is the fire at the end. The fire that finally saves them isn't the carefully tended signal fire that Ralph was obsessed with.
No, it's the raging forest fire that Jack sets to hunt and kill Ralph. Their act of ultimate savagery is what attracts the civilized Navy ship.
The savagery is what gets them rescued by the even bigger savages. It's a perfect, bitter irony.
So this whole narrative arc, it's just a slide, isn't it? A steady, horrifying slide from fun and games into absolute hell.
It is a descent, a fall from grace. And Golding marks the stages of it so carefully. It really starts with the loss of innocence. In the beginning, they were just kids swimming in the lagoon playing.
But then Jack kills the first pig.
And the language Golding uses is so important. He doesn't just say they got food. He writes that the killing was about the knowledge that they had outwitted a living thing, imposed their will upon it, taken away its life like a long, satisfying drink.
A phrasing like a long, satisfying drink.
Yeah.
It's so disturbing. It suggests that violence isn't just a means to an end. It feeds a thirst in them.
It awakens something. And to enable that violence, to let it loose, Jack puts on the mask, the painted face.
This is such a crucial psychological moment.
It's everything. The mask liberates him from shame and self-consciousness. Golding writes that behind the mask, Jack was liberated from shame and self-consciousness. He isn't Jack the choir boy anymore. He's a savage. It allows him to dissociate from his actions.
It's mob mentality 101. You lose your individual identity and you become part of the tribe. This concept, de-individuation, it's key to understanding how they can commit such atrocities later on.
And we see that mob mentality reach its absolute peak with the murder of Simon. The truly scary thing there is that even Ralph and Piggy participate, right? They're on the edge of the circle, but they're still chanting. They get swept up.
That is Golding's most damning point. If only Jack and his hunters had killed Simon, we could say, well, you know, some people are just bad. But Ralph and Peggy, the ego and the superego, the good guys, they get caught up in the dance, too.
Golding is saying that no one is immune to the mob. Under the right circumstances, with enough fear and adrenaline and chanting, even the most civilized person can participate in an atrocity. They can become a monster.
After Simon is killed, the gloves are completely off. Piggy is murdered in cold blood. It's calculated, not frenzied. And then they hunt Ralph. He's no longer a rival leader. He's prey. He's an animal to be killed.
And that leads us right to the ending. The Deus Ex Machina.
The arrival of the naval officer. It's such a jarring, sudden end to the horror.
It really is. Ralph is running for his life. Through the burning jungle, he bursts onto the beach, he trips, he looks up, and there's just an adult. A British officer in a pristine white uniform with a tidy little cap.
And the officer's reaction is just... it's fascinating. He looks at these filthy, painted, sobbing children holding sharpened sticks, and he says, fun and games.
He's completely oblivious to the horror. He sees it as boys playing war, like a game. And then he says that line, I should have thought that a pack of British boys, you're all British, aren't you, would have been able to put up a better show than that.
It's just dripping with irony. He's disappointed in their lack of civilization.
But he is standing on a beach in front of a massive warship, a cruiser with a gun on it.
Exactly. He is part of a grown-up version of the exact same game. Jack and Ralph were fighting over an island. The officer and his side are fighting over the entire world. The violence is the same, only the scale is different.
Golding is screaming at us, you think these kids are savages? Look at the adults, look at the nuclear weapons. The officer is the real savage.
Wow.
He just has better manners.
And Ralph, in that moment, he understands this. He doesn't cheer for his rescue. He weeps. Golding writes that incredible final sentence. Ralph wept for the end of innocence, the darkness of man's heart, and the fall through the air of the true, wise friend called Piggy.
He's been rescued from the island, but he's not saved. He can never be saved from the knowledge of what he's seen and what he's capable of.
It's a devastating ending, and it resonated so deeply when it came out, but the reception history of the book is actually quite a roller coaster, isn't it?
It really is. It wasn't an instant bestseller, was it?
No, it started pretty slow in the 50s, but then by the 1960s, it exploded. Time magazine called it Lord of the Campus. It became a cult classic among students.
It tapped right into the counterculture, the questioning of authority, the fears of the Cold War, the Vietnam War.
Right. Students looked at the adults running the Vietnam War and thought, Golding is right. The system is broken. Jack is in charge.
But then its popularity dipped in the 70s.
It did. And critics like James Baker argued that the temper of the times changed. By the mid-70s, you had this kind of Vietnam War fatigue. People were tired of violence and apocalyptic themes.
And there was a philosophical shift, too.
Tell me about that.
Well, there was a move towards believing that evil was the result of a disorganized society, something we could fix with better laws, or better economics, or better education.
A system problem, not a human problem.
Exactly. People didn't want to hear Golding's message that the beast is us. That's a terribly disempowering message. They wanted to believe the beast was the system, because you can change a system. You can't change human nature.
That makes a lot of sense, but it came roaring back in the 90s, and it's still huge today. I feel like now we often read it through the lens of, say, toxic masculinity and bullying.
Absolutely. The dynamics between the boys, the hazing, the dominance hierarchies, Jack's obsession with hunting and violence, it reads very clearly as a critique of toxic masculinity today.
And of course, it's a perennial favorite on the banned books list.
Naturally. You know, you've written a classic when people are trying to ban it 70 years later.
And why do they ban it?
Usually for the language, sucks to your ass, Mar, and things like that, or for the violence.
Yeah.
But also, sometimes for having demoralizing views. Some school boards think it's just too hopeless for children to read. It tells them that they are, at their core, monsters.
Well, this brings us to the pivot point of our entire deep dive. Because Lord of the Flies is a work of fiction. It's a what-if scenario. It's a parable cooked up by a traumatized war veteran. But nature has a funny way of testing these theories.
It does indeed. And this is where the story gets absolutely incredible. Because in 1965, 11 years after Golding published his bleak masterpiece, a group of schoolboys actually did get stranded on a deserted island.
This is the story of the Tongan castaways. And when I first read about this, I was genuinely shocked I hadn't heard it before. It is literally the real-life Lord of the Flies.
It is. The parallels are just stunning, but the outcome could not be more different. So let's set the scene. It's June 1965, Nuku'alofa, the capital of the island nation of Tonga.
In the South Pacific.
Yes. And you have 6 boys, students at a strict Catholic boarding school called St. Andrews. Their names were Sion, Stephen, Kolo, David, Luke, and Mano. They ranged in age from 13 to 19.
So roughly the same age demographic as Golding's characters.
Exactly. And just like board school boys everywhere, they wanted an adventure, they were tired of the school food, tired of the strict rules, so they decided to borrow a boat and sail to Fiji.
Fiji is about 500 miles away.
A mere 500 miles. They borrowed, as you say, meaning they stole a 24-foot fishing boat. They didn't bring a map, they didn't bring a compass, they brought 2 sacks of bananas, a few coconuts, and a small gas burner. That was their entire plan.
This sounds like a disaster waiting to happen from the first second.
An absolute catastrophe. And it was. They fell asleep the first night out at sea. A huge storm hit, the anchor rope broke, the sail was shredded to ribbons, the rudder snapped off.
They were dead in the water.
Just drifting. For 8 days, they drifted without food or water. They were trying to catch drops of rain in their cupped hands. They were dehydrated, starving, totally lost. Then finally, on the 8th day, they spotted an island. Aita, a rugged, uninhabited volcanic rock jutting out of the ocean. It used to be inhabited, but the entire population was kidnapped by slave traders in the 1860s, and it had been completely abandoned ever since. The boys abandoned their sinking boat and swam for it.
How far did they have to swim?
The reports vary, but some say they were in the water for up to 36 hours to get to the shore.
36 hours. That's an insane level of resilience right there before they even get to the island.
It really is. And when they landed, they were in terrible shape. But here's the crucial difference from Golding's book. They were on this island not for a few weeks, but for 15 months.
15. Over a year. Golding's boys fell apart in, what, a month or two? These kids were there for over a year. So following Golding's logic, they should have been worshiping a pig head and hunting each other with spears by the end.
Right. They should have split into warring tribes and killed the smart one. But that is not what happened. It's not even close to what happened.
So tell us, what did they actually do?
They cooperated. They set up a functioning commune. The first thing they did was make a pact to work together. They worked in teams of 2. They had a roster for everything.
For what? What was there to do?
They created a garden to grow wild taro and bananas. They figured out how to domesticate wild chickens. They hollowed out tree trunks to store rainwater so they would never be desperately thirsty again. They built a badminton court.
Wait, a badminton court?
A badminton court.
Yeah.
And a gymnasium with weights made from rocks and coconuts.
A gym. They were stranded in a life or death situation and they decided to get swole.
Keeping active, keeping a routine, it's vital for mental and physical health. And get this. They kept a signal fire burning continuously for more than a year.
That's the one thing Ralph couldn't get his boys to do.
Do you remember in Lord of the Flies how they couldn't keep the fire going because they were too busy hunting and fighting? These Tongan boys, on a strict roster, kept that fire alive, 247. It never went out.
That requires an immense amount of discipline and cooperation.
It does. And they had culture, they had art. They started and ended every single day with song and prayer. And they even made a guitar.
You're kidding me. How?
They found a piece of driftwood for the body, used half a coconut shell, and then stripped wire from the wreckage of their boat for the strings. They composed 5 songs during their time on the island.
This sounds, I mean, obviously it was a struggle for survival, but it sounds like a real community. Did they fight? They had to have fought.
Of course they fought. They were teenage boys trapped on a rock. But, and this is the absolute key, they had a system for conflict resolution.
What was it?
When an argument broke out, the 2 boys involved would impose a timeout on themselves. They agreed to separate. They would go to opposite ends of the island, cool off for a few hours, and then they would come back together, talk it out, and apologize.
They didn't let the anger fester.
They didn't let it turn into resentment or violence.
Right.
They dealt with it. It's more mature than most adults I know.
Absolutely.
And there's one specific incident that just perfectly highlights the difference between Golding's fiction and this reality. In Lord of the Flies, when someone gets hurt or is weak, like Piggy, they are a burden. They are mocked and eventually eliminated.
Right.
But on Ada, one of the boys, Stephen, was exploring a cliff face. And he slipped and fell. He broke his leg badly, a compound fracture.
In a survival situation, a broken leg is often a death sentence. Or at the very least, it means you can't contribute. You're a liability.
Exactly. But the other 5 boys didn't ostracize him. They didn't even think about it. They carried him back to the camp. They set his leg using sticks and vines. They took over all of his chores on the roster. They brought him food and water. They nursed him back to health for months.
And his leg healed.
When they were finally rescued, a doctor in Australia looked at the leg and said the bones had healed perfectly.
That's incredible. It's pure altruism in the face of extreme adversity. So how did they finally get off the rock?
It's September 1966, 15 months in. An Australian lobster fisherman named Peter Warner is sailing his boat past Ada. He was taking a shortcut he didn't normally take. He looked at the island through his binoculars and noticed something strange.
The fire.
Patches of burned grass. But not from a wildfire. They were controlled burns for agriculture. And then he saw him. A naked boy with hair down to his shoulders dive into the water and start swimming frantically toward his boat.
Stephen.
He swam out to the boat, and Peter Warner says the first thing the boy yelled in perfect English was, "We are 6, and we think we have been here 15 months.
I cannot imagine what Peter Warner must have been thinking. He must have thought he was hallucinating.
He was deeply skeptical. He got on his radio and called back to the operator in Nuku'alofa to check the story. He said, "I've got 6 boys here who say they're from your school." And the operator on the other end just started crying. He said, "You found them. You found them. These boys have been given up for dead. Funerals have been held for them. If it's them, this is a miracle."
Goosebumps. That is an incredible story. So they get home, there's a huge parade, everyone is happy, reunited with their families.
Well, there is a twist, a very ironic bureaucratic twist. When they got back to Tonga, the police promptly arrested all 6 of them.
Wait, what? Why? Are you serious?
For stealing the boat.
You have to be kidding me. After surviving for 15 months on a deserted island, they get thrown in jail for stealing the boat they were shipwrecked in.
The owner of the boat they had borrowed 15 months prior was still mad about it and pressed charges. The Ada 6, these heroes of survival, were thrown in jail.
That's insane.
Peter Warner, the fisherman who rescued them, actually had to bail them out. He went to the owner and paid him £150 for the lost boat. And in exchange, he got the Australian film rights to their story for a Channel 7 documentary. That's how he paid the guy off.
That is the most bureaucratic ending to a survival miracle I have ever heard. But it brings us to the big aha moment, the big question. Why? Why did Golding's boys turn into Nazis and the Tongan boys turn into a functioning cooperative commune?
This is the central argument made by the Dutch historian Rutger Bregman, who really brought this story back to light. He calls Lord of the Flies a veneer theory story, the idea that our civilization is just a thin veneer, a thin coating over a savage Habesian beast.
And the Tongan story proves the opposite.
Bregman argues that it proves the opposite, that in a crisis, our deeper instinct is not to turn on each other, but to gravitate toward cooperation. We are social animals. We survive by working together, not by eating each other.
But is it that simple? Or is there a cultural difference here that we have to account for?
And that is the crucial nuance we have to consider. Golding's characters were products of a rigid, competitive British class system. They were boarding school boys used to hierarchy, dominance, and bullying. They were largely strangers to each other, thrown together by chance.
Whereas the Tongan boys...
The Tongan boys were friends. Some were relatives. And more importantly, they came from a Polynesian culture, a Tongan culture, that places a massive central value on community, on Kainga, on cohesion and sharing. Their default setting was cooperation.
So the software you're running in your head, your cultural programming, determines how you react when the hardware of society is removed.
Exactly. And Golding was a man profoundly traumatized by a war where he saw the absolute worst of humanity. He projected that trauma onto his characters. The Tungan boys, despite being young, approached their situation with a cultural mindset of, we survive together or we die together.
It makes you wonder, if Golding had known about the Tungan boys, would he have written a different book? Or was he just trying to warn us about a possibility?
I think he was trying to warn us. And that warning is still valid. Lord of the Flies isn't a documentary, it's a parable. It shows what can happen when fear takes over. When a demigod like Jack uses fear of a manufactured beast to manipulate people, when we stop listening to reason, to Piggy, and stop caring about morality, about Simon.
It's a warning about our potential for darkness. We have the potential to become Jack. But the Tungan story shows we also have the potential to be, well, to be Stephen and Kolo and Mono.
Precisely. We aren't inherently good or inherently evil. We are, it seems, inherently flexible. We adapt to our circumstances and, crucially, to the stories we tell ourselves about who we are. Golding told a story of despair. The Tungan boys lived a story of hope.
So when we synthesize this, it feels like Lord of the Flies remains a masterpiece of literature because it forces us to confront that darkness. We need to look at it. We need to know that Roger is lurking inside all of us, holding that stone.
But we also need to know that we don't have to throw it.
And that if we help each other, if we set the broken leg instead of leaving the person to die, we can survive the island. The real Lord of the Flies isn't a story of bloodshed. It's a story of friendship and resilience.
It's a much more hopeful vision of humanity.
I have a final thought to mess with your head, though. We talked about the ending of the book, the naval officer. He saves the boys from their small-scale war, but he's off to fight a large-scale nuclear war.
Right.
Golding wrote about boys to talk about men. Maybe the scariest thing isn't what the kids did on the island. Maybe it's that the grown-ups run the entire world exactly like Jack runs his tribe, just with bigger weapons and better uniforms.
That is the lingering question, isn't it? If the naval officer is the real savage, the ultimate Lord of the Flies, then who is going to rescue us?
So the question for you to think about is this. If you were stranded on an island, be honest with yourself. Would you follow Jack for the meat and the power? Would you stick with Ralph for the rules and the fire? Or would you try to build a gym and a guitar like the Tungan boys? Or is the beast truly just us?
It's a question worth asking every time you look in the mirror.
Go reread the book. I promise it hits different when you know the real story. Thanks for diving deep with us.
Until next time.